Hey, Josh Nation or Josh Podians, and welcome back to another episode of OMJ, the Oh My Josh podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things Josh Hutcherson. It's your fangirl bestie G here, and yes, I do mean that. You're here, whether it's because you stan Josh Hutcherson, like my TikTok videos, or your algorithm just dropped a blessing on you. No matter what, I'm glad you're here, and since you are here, I consider you a friend. I also consider you a Josh Podian if you're a subscriber. So that's what's up with the change of intro today. For you see, long before this podcast existed, back before the days of my TikTok story times, the only Josh content I created was on my blog on ohmygoshhutcherson.com. And yes, it does still exist today, but the majority of my effort goes to my socials. That blog is where some of my original language started. Josh Nation is how I address my readers, which for a long while was just my mom and a few friends, so hardly Josh Nation, but whatever. Truthfully, it was just lazy fan language on my part, and now we have something better that's unique to my content. Josh Podians. Phew, that was a long way of telling y'all that I'll now be officially using Josh Podians instead of Josh Nation. But hey, that's the beauty of having your own podcast. You can take the audience on as many listening side quests as you'd like. Knowing me, that won't be the last one of this episode, but we do have a big topic for this one, so it's time to dive in. Today, we'll be discussing Josh's most recent theatrical release, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, aka FNAF 2. Since I was lucky enough to attend the premiere in LA, I'll begin by sharing my experience going to see it on the big night. Then I'll give you my thoughts on the film, both the good and the bad. This is also where I'll share my opinions on Josh's performance, since he is the heart of OMJ. Lastly, I'll share some predictions on what we know about the future of FNAF in film. We'll dive into all that in just a moment after a word from our totally real and not fake sponsor. This episode of the Oh My Josh podcast is proudly sponsored by Malark Bakery. If you have a sweet tooth, love bread, or just love supporting family businesses, this is the place for you. For a limited time, Malark Bakery is giving OMJ listeners an exclusive discount on their new Sunset cookies. These treats are expertly decorated with a beautiful orange frosting inspired by sunsets. To learn more about this completely real offer, visit my fan site, ohmygoshhutcherson.com. With that out of the way, let's start by chatting about my experience at the premiere of FNAF 2 in LA. And yes, I am talking about the actual Hollywood premiere with the red carpet. This was my first time attending anything like this, and if you're wondering how the heck I got in, that's a completely fair question because currently I'm a small content creator. While I'm appreciative of the audience I have, I'm a little fish in a big pond, and creators of my size are usually not invited to this kind of thing, nor do I have any special connections. What do I have? That fangirl tenacity that always tends to take over. I got there early and waited in line with a group of kind FNAF and Josh fans, and it's because of those kind FNAF fans that I got in. So how did it all go down? Well, there was some bonding going on within that line, and with this sweet group of humans, that was easy to do. FNAF and Josh fans continue to prove to be some of the most friendly and passionate people out there. They matched my energy when I showed up on the scene in my Josh dress, we'll talk about my attire later, and handed out FNAF and Josh-related friendship bracelets to all the waiting fans. I even gave some to the security team members at the Chinese theater because when I went over to the red carpet area as it was being set up, they were so helpful and patient when I asked all the questions. While I enjoyed the actual premiere itself, waiting for hours with fellow fans and chatting with them about our shared passion was probably my favorite part of the day. If anyone I met in person that day is listening, whether we talked for 5 minutes or hours, know you will hold a special place in my heart forever. And an extra special shout out to the fan who was able to get an extra ticket to the event and their friends who decided to gift it to me. Y'all know who you are. I will never forget you, and I hope that you get 1 billion karma points for that. So, in a nutshell, that's how I got in, because our community is incredible. The ticket was for a 5th row seat, which happened to line up pretty well with where Josh ended up standing, because of course it did. But we'll get into that later. First, let me walk you through the night. I entered through a line and door to the right of the red carpet, so I was instructed to bypass it. Unfortunately, My ticket didn't include red carpet access, and while that was disappointing, I was certainly cool with it because I was fortunate to even be there, period. After a brief security check, I found myself inside the Chinese theater for the first time. The lobby was getting busy because it was filling up with folks from the line that I was in, and people were coming in after visiting the red carpet. I hung out in the lobby for a bit, taking in the atmosphere and handing out more bracelets. I may have gifted a few to some famous folks without realizing who they were because I'm a long-term Josh fan, but a little new to FNAF. But hey, I was just excited. I would have given out a bracelet to all 900 people in the theater if I could have, because apparently that's how many folks the theater holds. But of course, I hadn't made nearly that many. Still, I bet quite a few people were walking around the premiere with bracelets on thanks to me. So I wonder if Josh noticed the additions to people's wrists and thought back to his time in Paris where the fan gave him 40 friendship bracelets. Was she there? Yes, Josh, I was, and I wish I could have given you a FNAF bracelet as well, but I've already given you about 39 too many, so I'm willing to bet you don't mind. But y'all, it was worth the risk. Going back to the story of my experience, I enjoyed a little bit more chit-chat with other fans in the lobby, grabbed some free popcorn and soda, and then made it to my seat. Shortly after, producer and CEO Jason Blum appeared to say a few words, and then he brought out FNAF 2 director Emma Tammy. She introduced the cast, which included Matthew Lillard, Elizabeth Lyle, Piper Rubio, and of course, Josh. The actors were really only out for a few moments, but it was long enough for me to enthusiastically wave at Josh, my remaining friendship bracelets rattling and shaking. Since I was right up front, my enthusiasm was likely visible, and I will forever be grateful for the privilege of sitting in that seat. I also consider it to have been a privilege to have seen the movie early, and the film is what we'll be discussing next. After the cast made their brief debut, the theater darkened and the film began, and so did my first experience watching a highly anticipated movie with an audience of that size. It was so fun to see, hear, and experience all of the different audience reactions. It was very different from the other 2 times I've seen it back on my home state with a much smaller crowd. Yes, I've seen it 3 times and definitely have some thoughts. So let's get into part 2 of today's episode, which is discussing what I think about the movie. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's start with the good. Not to sound like a broken record, since everyone and their mother seems to agree on this, but the animatronics truly were incredible. Perhaps I'm spoiled because I got to see their hard work pay off in person at Universal Orlando's Halloween Horror Nights, but I went in with high expectations and they were definitely met. And animatronics aside, there was a lot of phenomenal acting, and given the cast, that's not surprising. Josh's performance was exactly what I'd expect from him, a solid one. And I do have a few additional callouts on it. We do get a decent amount of laughs in this one, and I feel that Josh's comedic timing and delivery was a nice pairing. He was able to deliver the lines and actions of the character, like nervously eating the bread on his date with Vanessa, without taking us out of the moment. Josh's acting abilities also stood out to me during the scene where he begs Abby's old friends to help. I thought he really captured the desperation and fear that Mike was experiencing, and it really allowed me to connect with this character more in that moment. I've seen some online discourse criticizing that scene overall, not necessarily Josh's acting, but the scene itself for existing. Yes, it is in cheesy territory, and we'll get into that a little later, but I feel like Josh's interpretation of the scene balanced that out a little bit. And speaking of dramatic scenes, Matthew Lillard screaming at Vanessa, oh my goodness. Matthew is a legend, and me or anyone giving him praise for his acting abilities certainly isn't groundbreaking, but I still have to say it. That was fantastic. He's not even in a lot of the film, but the moments where we do get him were iconic. I was more scared of his character, William Afton, than any crazy mangle scene, and I think that's kind of the point. Lastly, on the acting front, I want to give a shout out to Megan Fox. Perhaps I'm a little biased because I grew up with Megan Fox's work the way I did with Josh's movies. To me, she will always be Carla Santini from Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen. But I thought Megan was amazing as Toy Chica. She managed to sound both creepy and cutesy at the same time. Just really nailed the role, in my opinion. Other than the acting, I appreciate all of the clear effort they made to satisfy fans with the Easter eggs. While I'm not really an OG FNAF fan and will admit that I'm only now starting to scratch the surface of the lore, I just have to call that out as a win. While some people feel that they were just doing it for the sake of doing so and that there was too much going on, the pace of the film was actually another pro on my list. With the fairly short runtime and their mission to pack in so many references, I actually liked the quick pace. The film didn't drag for me, and we were always a moment away from another moment to react to. Lastly, on a similar note, some viewers shared that they felt too many new characters were added. I disagree. Was it a lot? Kinda, yeah. And perhaps they could have eliminated a few, but some of them had a really solid purpose. For example, McKenna Grace's character sets the stage for what's possible with the puppet in the current time and foreshadows the main conflict of the film. So who or what should have been eliminated? Let's talk about that as we discuss my critiques of the film. Personally, I would have handed back the script with a lot of red pen. While I liked the quick pace, I didn't really feel that every scene packed a punch, and I would have made a few changes. For example, I feel that we have too much time in the classroom with Abby. While her friendships were cute, they don't add much to the movie, and I just overall feel puzzled by the teacher subplot we had going on. It's never really explained why the teacher singles out Abby so much. Is there more to the story there? Something where someone he knew was also one of William Afton's victims and Abby reminds him of that pain? My honest guess is no, but that aspect just didn't feel realistic to me. In fact, the animatronic fights felt more realistic than a science teacher randomly targeting a kid who seemingly did nothing wrong, to the point where they legitimately bully them and purposely break their science project. Did his weird behavior make it more satisfying when Toy Chica killed him? Yes, but I don't think he needed as much screen time as he got. Of course, questions about the teacher aren't the only and certainly not the main wonderings viewers were left with. While I get that they're cooking here and future films may answer things I'm wondering about, a lot of things just made me go, huh? Again, since I admittedly am not a big FNAF fan who knows the lore, perhaps some background knowledge would have saved me, but it's my understanding that this movie follows their own world and story anyway. I've seen the film a few times, and I'm still confused by Vanessa's role in her father's activities. Was she strictly a victim, or was there something more sinister going on with her character? Why does Vanessa have all of these items belonging to victims of her father? While a good film generally does and should leave the audience with some questions if they're setting up for another one, the amount of unanswered topics in FNAF 2 felt a little unsatisfying to me. Even though I loved the quick pace, I wish they had extended the runtime to a solid 2 hours and answered a few more of those. They potentially could have done this by making vague scenes a little bit more concrete. For example, we don't really get much from Vanessa's dream scene. I particularly enjoyed Elizabeth and Matthew's acting there, but plot-wise and character-wise, it doesn't give us much to solve these mysteries. My other criticism of the writing, and one it sounds like I'm in the majority with, was the cheesiness. The cheesy lines just didn't quite fit the scarier tone they were going for, and while yes, they did step up the scariness a little bit in this one, like with all the jump scares, the lines took away from those a bit. I think a little cheesiness did make sense at certain points, like during scenes that showcase the love between siblings Abby and Mike, but I still think the vast majority of those could have been axed in favor of a darker tone. All of this criticism aside, I still loved the film. And you know what else I love? Character analysis. Let's shift into this by discussing how I feel about our main characters presented in this sequel. Starting off with Mike, we love a consistent king. To me, Mike's reactions were true to character and made sense. Given what he and Abby went through in the first film, and given his character's main motivation, which is to move on, I get why the story ended how it did. I'll admit that during my first viewing, the "just stay away" comment felt abrupt, but Mike was showcasing his distaste for Vanessa's secrecy and actions throughout the whole film. While we did get that cute date scene, the majority of the Vanessa-Mike scenes in the film weren't exactly positive interactions. Even though it would have been nice to see a happy ending, Mike's behavior in the film felt realistic. But what about Vanessa? Was her behavior realistic? My gut is telling me yes, but admittedly, it's hard for me to truly provide thoughts on her character when I have more questions than I do feedback at this point. A lot of Vanessa's actions are likely tied to trauma, but they're also likely tied to something that we just don't know about yet. I feel like I can't truly form an opinion on Vanessa until the rest of the puzzle comes together, which hopefully happens sometime in film 3. I am curious to know exactly what her role was in her father's twisted past. Although, my guess is that if she were somehow involved, it wasn't voluntary. Does she really love Mike and Abby? I believe she does. Things aren't always black and white, and we are talking about a woman whose father is a serial killer. Vanessa likely has some heavy wounds, and I'm not quite sure that she or Mike are in a place to date right now, as adorable as the scene with the bread was. And what about my thoughts on Abby? The events of the first film left a huge imprint on her, both positively and negatively. On the positive side, the connections that she had with the ghost kids were clearly special, and it makes sense why in her formative years, and as a kid who's been through a lot, she was clinging on to that. However, one aspect that didn't quite line up to me was her social status at school. Mike encourages her to make friends with real kids, but we get scenes where it seems like she does have real friends. She seems quite popular on the bus, and ironically, the horrific events of the first film are interesting to her classmates. I will admit that what could be happening here is that while on the outside it seems like Abby has all this support, on the inside she isn't really fully invested in cultivating these relationships with these real kids because things feel too undone with the ghost kid friends. I also feel that Abby's maturity level was played down a little. Her drawings, for example, seem to reflect those of a younger child, and I wish that we had gotten to see a more grown-up version of Abby. Perhaps everything that she went through in life left an impact on her maturity speed, but she didn't quite feel like a realistic middle schooler to me. Her mannerisms seemed to match one of a younger child, but to her credit, she was left alone by Mike versus needing a babysitter this time, so that shows her age. Leaving her alone resulted in her running away, but hey, at least that was bold of her. Abby does have a lot of guts in this film, just like in the first, even if she was lacking a little bit in the maturity department. So what's next for her, Mike, and Vanessa? At the time of recording this podcast in late December of 2025, that's still unknown. While the second film followed on the first movie's footsteps of being a financial success, and that usually points to another one being made, nothing has been officially confirmed yet. What do I predict for the future of the movie franchise? I likely think they'll keep going with it as long as they're turning a profit. And as a Josh fan, that's good news in my book as it keeps him employed, although we don't know the fate of his character in the next one. Plot details and cast details have yet to be revealed, so your guess is as good as mine. What I'd like to see happen, though, as I've ranted about throughout this entire episode, is more backstory. The people want answers. I'm the people. I want answers. Well, and the entire FNAF community, which is a big one. And whether you're listening as a member of that community or my Podian community, I thank you for checking out the Oh My Josh podcast. To stay connected with me, please be sure to follow me on TikTok and Instagram under @ohmyjoshpod. Check out my Josh fan site over at ohmygoshhutcherson.com and subscribe to the podcast so you are alerted when I release future episodes. Until next time, peace and Josh parody.